They said no carbon blood could survive on Carthun 4. She gave them 10 minutes to be wrong. Snow hissed like a whispering god as it scoured the dome of glass. Shielding the observation chamber, the alien amphitheater was silent now. Rows of glimmering eyes, tentacles, and armored skulls frozen in disbelief, all staring through the pane at a single figure kneeling in the blizzard. Human. Her breath fogged inside her helmet, chest rising in sharp, practiced rhythm. Her hands, red and cracked, moved with brutal precision, shaping the curve of the dome, block after block, drawn from the same frigid earth the others swore would kill her in seconds. She had 6 minutes left. 1 week earlier, Elara Ken had seen too many broken worlds to fear another. Her boots crunched over frostbitten dust as the shuttle ramp hissed open, revealing the execution ground they called a university. Carthun 4, not a planet, a trial. The air was acid-laced ice, the storms perpetual. Even the local fauna had evolved armor so thick it choked out light. To the Carthun Empire, this was a right of supremacy. To the humans of the Galactic Academy, it was a humiliation. Elara wasn't even supposed to be here. She wasn't a soldier or a diplomat. She was a survival engineer, 5th ranked in her cycle, assigned to logistics, not field ops. But when the professor challenged the humans directly, the stakes changed. The challenge had been broadcast on every frequency from the Academy towers. No carbon-based organism can construct a sustainable shelter within 10 standard minutes under Carthun is atmospheric pressure. Not even the humans. Prove me wrong, if you dare. The Carthun professor who delivered it, Vraxidal, had 3 doctorates in xenobiology and a hunger for humiliation. His words weren't just an academic jab, they were a declaration. No one responded until Elara sent a single message, "Give me 10 minutes, and a shovel." The transport crew had stared at her like she'd cracked. "Are you insane?" muttered Idris Harlan, her commanding officer. "This isn't a demonstration. It's a death sentence." She didn't look up as she tightened the seals on her suit. "We've survived worse. Let me remind them." He stepped forward. "We don't need to prove anything to these bastards. Let it go." But Alara's eyes burned cold. "They think we're fragile," she said. "Let them watch us bend the ice to our will." She stepped into the storm alone. Now, for minutes left, she packed the last block into place, her gloves stiff from blood and frost. The Igloo dome arched above her, primitive by design, perfect by necessity. Each curve redistributed pressure, each seam sealed with snow. She crawled inside, sealing the tunnel entrance. The storm howled outside. The temperature dropped past survivable. Inside the igloo, it held. A single chemical heat pack ignited. The air warmed by 2 degrees. Her suit sensors stopped screaming. And for the first time since she stepped onto the planet, Elara closed her eyes. Inside the observation dome, silence cracked into noise. The structure is holding, hissed a Zarnian observer. No collapse. Thermal stabilization confirmed. She did it. Another whispered. Vraxidal stood unmoving, mandibles twitching. "This proves nothing. Primitive luck. The carbon blood simply delayed her demise." Idris Harlan stepped forward from the human delegation, voice low and deadly. "You said 10 minutes. It's been 8. She's alive. She built shelter. She beat your planet." But Elara wasn't done. From the igloo sealed hatch, a camera drone she'd buried earlier powered up, its signal shooting into the stars, to Earth, to the colonies, to every cadet who had been laughed out of a lab, to every species that thought humanity was only a fluke of blood and breath. Her voice came over the feed, calm, quiet, final. "You want to test us, measure us, break us, but you don't understand. We don't endure because we're strong. We endure because we refuse to die when we're told to." The screen went dark, and in the amphitheater, the silence returned, not of disbelief this time, but of something worse. Fear. They didn't say it would be like this. The universe, that is, not all of it, anyway. Just the Carthun Empire. The words echoed in Alara's mind as she paced inside the observation chamber, her boots silent against the cold metal floor. They brought her back to the Academy, back to the heart of human resolve. But it wasn't the warm embrace of victory that greeted her. It was a chill she couldn't shake. Commander Idris Harlan stood by the viewport, staring into the void. His face was tight, but his eyes were scanning, calculating. The hum of the ship's engines was drowned out by the weight of the message they had sent. "We will not bow. We will not be broken." But something had stirred in the Carthun Empire. They were not a race to be dismissed easily. Humiliation wasn't a feeling they tolerated for long. You did it, Idris said, voice low. You showed them what humans are capable of. Alara didn't smile. She had expected no different outcome. What had concerned her was what followed. The sudden quiet from Vraxidal and the Carthoon Council. The unreadable expressions that lingered before they left the amphitheater, as though they were already planning their retaliation. But they couldn't just admit defeat. Not like this. Then the communication came, not from the Carthoon themselves, but from a distant, uncharted sector. We've been watching you, the message began, a low, mechanical tone. Not just Carthoon 4, everything. Your species is an anomaly. We will correct that. The screen went black. No signature. No origin. The source couldn't be traced. It was as though the universe itself had warned them. Alara ran a hand through her hair. She had lived through so much of the galaxy's scorn, but this was different. This wasn't the Carthoon Empire throwing its weight around. This was something colder, something that didn't just aim to dominate, but to erase. And now, with the remnants of the Carthoon Empire's pride still broken across the ice planet, something much larger was rising in the shadows. It wasn't just about surviving now. It was about finding out who was behind that message and what they wanted with humanity. The storm clouds over Carthoon 4 were still thick when Vraxidal sent his response. A challenge that would stretch the very definition of their kind's arrogance. The Carthoon were not used to losing, and they would not settle for a single human's defiance. A fleet, dark and vast, shifted into orbit. Hundreds of ships, each as massive as a moon. Their hulls made from a dark material that absorbed light, not reflected it. It was a reminder that the Carthoon weren't just a species of warriors. They were also scholars, architects of terror, and masters of weaponry. Vraxidal's words had a venomous bite. We shall not tolerate this foolishness. The test is far from over. Prepare for what you will lose. A command ship descended to the surface. A churning maelstrom of magnetic waves and metal. It wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon. And for the first time since her encounter with the alien professor, Alara felt something more than fear. It was a shadow, long and creeping, settling into the pit of her stomach. Inside the academy, things moved fast. The silent response from the Carthoon was the beginning of a chain reaction. Within days, they discovered that the message wasn't a warning from the Carthoon alone. The unknown fleet had been linked to another power, one older than the Carthoon, one with more blood on its hands than the galaxy dared to imagine. The Overseers, a name whispered in the darkest corners of space, a forgotten empire that had vanished before the first human ships had ever left Sol's orbit. The one force capable of reshaping an entire star system without leaving a trace. An ancient civilization hunting, collecting, destroying any species that threatened the natural order of extinction. They wiped away the proudest empires the galaxy had ever known in the name of their own twisted survival. They were the universe's true hunters, the first apex predators, and now they were coming for humanity. Alara's nerves were tight, her mind racing. The Carthoon were a threat, yes, but even they feared the Overseers. In the cold silence of her quarters, she reviewed every report, every fragment of intelligence. It didn't take long to see a disturbing pattern. The same remnants of the ancient species had shown up in historical archives, in ruined colonies. In the dark corners of space, where no one had dared to venture, the Carthoon, despite their arrogance, knew what they faced. But Vraxidal, blinded by the thrill of victory and now nursing the galaxy-wide wound to his pride, had unknowingly invited the Overseers into their conflict. And they weren't just coming for Carthoon 4. They were coming for everything. A thrum of urgency ran through Alara. The Academy's tactics weren't enough. Even the fleet they'd mobilized couldn't guarantee survival. The only way to stop this was to face the unknown head-on, to take the fight to the Overseers before they unleashed their full power. A voice broke through her thoughts, soft, steady. Idris, we don't have much time. Alara, the fleet will arrive in hours. The Carthoon are already digging in, but the Overseers are the real threat. We need a way to fight them. Her answer was quiet, resolute. We start with the thing they fear most, human ingenuity. But we need to find their weakness before they find ours. The universe was about to learn what it truly meant to be human. They said we couldn't adapt fast enough, so we stopped adapting and started evolving. It began in the dark, the kind of darkness that seeps into your bones. In the hidden cryo archives beneath Europa Station, A single file blinked. To life, a forgotten signal, an old war log. Timestamp, pre-Exodus era. File name, Project Iris. Human edge Alara Kent stood alone, breath fogging in the frigid air of the forgotten vault. The past thrummed beneath her boots, servers older than most colonies. Humming faintly as if surprised to be remembered, she leaned closer to the terminal. Run it again. The AI voice responded, aged and raspy from centuries of dust. Project Iris initiated. Prototype, adaptive combat constructs, human-only interface. Purpose, survive environments no other species can. Termination reason, ethics violation. Risk of planetary destabilization. Alara's heart pounded. She hadn't come looking for weapons. She came for a miracle, and she might have found one. Back aboard the flagship Resolute Ash, Idris Harlan watched the first reports pour in. The Overseer Vanguard had entered the sector, small, insectal ships shaped like fractured bone, each one trailing black light in silence like a cloak. They didn't broadcast. They didn't speak. They harvested. 3 scout outposts were gone. No debris. No survivors. Just heat echoes and splintered planets. The Carthun fleet, once so proud, had shifted into a silent formation around Carthun 4. Even Vraxidal, the professor whose arrogance had started this storm, had gone dark. For the first time, Idris saw the truth. This wasn't a war. It was a culling. Are you out of your mind? Idris snapped. Alara's voice stayed level, but every word she spoke carried weight. Project Iris wasn't a weapon. It was a survival key, engineered adaptation, field-modifiable tissue response. Neural-linked architecture. She raised her hands. It made humans something more. Not machines, not monsters, but exactly what the universe fears, a species that refuses to stay in its evolutionary lane. Idris stepped toward her. That project was buried for a reason. People died. They survived first. He paused. The war around them didn't wait, and Alara pressed her advantage. The Overseers don't leave survivors. They erase entire bloodlines. But Iris, she wasn't just a suit. She was memory. Human resilience encoded in living form. She learned from death and made it fuel. Her voice lowered. Let me activate it. Just once. Give me one prototype. If it fails, we bury it again. But if it works, she didn't finish. She didn't have to, because Idris knew if humanity had a chance at resisting extinction, it wasn't through numbers. It was through transcendence. They brought the prototype out of Europa under escort. It wasn't a weapon so much as a coffin, sleek, curved like bone and carbon, covered in etchings older than the Mars colonies. The scientists called it Iris One. Alara called it hope. The neural grafting process was excruciating, not because it hurt, but because it awakened everything. Past traumas, lost memories, echoes of Earth, pain Alara had buried so deep she didn't know it had a voice. Iris whispered through her nerves, "You are not enough yet, but you will be." The transformation didn't make her faster or stronger in obvious ways. She didn't sprout wings or fire bolts from her hands, but her blood no longer froze on Carthun 4. Her lungs no longer needed Earth's atmosphere. Her thoughts processed tactics 10 moves ahead, and her skin, her very flesh, began to resist entropy. She became the first human to walk unaided into a blizzard that had once torn alloy apart. She didn't build an igloo this time. She became the shelter. News spread fast, even in war. Across the Allied networks, the rumors lit like wildfire. She walked through the ice storm without a suit, her body adapted mid-battle. She survived a pulse wave that melted steel. She was changing, and deep within the Overseer fleet, something pulsed. They turned toward her signal because they recognized her, not as a threat, not yet, but as a deviation, a fracture in the expected evolution tree, an anomaly that needed to be corrected. The first real battle came, without warning. 3 Overseer vessels decloaked above the human outpost on Sarek's moon. Their ships bent the laws of light, appearing like shimmering cracks in the sky. No warning, no hails, just annihilation. Alara responded in less than 4 minutes. She dropped from low orbit with only Iris between her and the vacuum. No armor, no fleet, just her. The battle was short, but it rewrote history. The Overseers attacked with gravitational ruptures and sonic spears. Alara moved like a living storm, predicting, reacting, evolving with each strike. She absorbed one of their weapons, not with tech, with her skin. Then she used it back against them. The The final overseer ship ruptured in a flash of black heat, its core devouring itself. The humans watching below didn't cheer. They wept, because for the first time, someone had turned back the darkness. As the fragments of the battle cooled in orbit, Alara's voice echoed across every open frequency. You wanted proof. Here it is. We are not fragile. We are not primitive. We are the storm you didn't see coming, and we're not done. Somewhere, in the frozen void, the overseers turned their full gaze toward Earth. But now, Earth had turned into something else. They didn't come to conquer us. They came to dissect us. Before we evolved again, the overseers no longer whispered through deep space. They roared. 3 systems vanished in a single day. Entire biospheres harvested clean, their cores left hollow and spinning, not conquered, not burned, just emptied. The Carthoon called it the silencing. Even they had never seen the overseers move like this. Not even in the collapse of the Janari fold, not in the extinction of the Virics colonies. Alara watched the broadcast from a command chamber deep within the resolute ash. Her body still shimmered faintly with iris neural charge, though her voice was steady. They're accelerating, she said. They've identified Iris as a deviation. They think if they strike fast enough, they'll stop us from spreading the anomaly. Commander Idris Harlan folded his arms, face grim. They're not wrong. We can't replicate the neural graphs fast enough. Iris to through -5. Are still unstable. We don't need an army of me, Alara said. We just need time and belief. But belief was in short supply. The Alliance Council had fractured into fear. Some colonies were pulling back their fleets. Others had gone dark, fearing overseer retaliation. Even whispers of surrender began to poison the comm channels. Idris looked out the viewport, to the stars that now flickered like dying embers. We can't hold them off forever. No, Alara agreed, but we can make them bleed. Carthoon had become a staging ground, not for war, but for legend. Where once Alara had built an igloo under alien scorn, now hardened bunkers, and force domes rose from the ice, carved by hybrid tech, part Carthoon, part human, part iris-grown alloy. Vraxil had not fled, shamed, yes, furious, always, but he remained. He met Alara atop a ridge overlooking the frozen basin, where the stars glittered like shards of broken teeth. You mock physics, he said coldly. I survived physics, she corrected. Big difference. He regarded her, eyes flicking over the shimmer of her skin, alive with adaptive resonance. You have become a heresy, he murmured, not just to the overseers, to us. Then maybe you need new gods. The silence between them cracked with distant thunder, not from the sky, but from beneath the ice. The overseers were tunneling now, coming from below, hunting her. You still don't understand, Vraxil growled. They aren't fighting for conquest. They're fighting to keep the equation clean. They fear mutation. Alara turned toward the chasm. Then let's be the glitch that breaks them. The overseer's first full assault struck Carthoon for 12 hours later. A black obelisk the size of a mountain broke the clouds and descended like a falling god. Beneath it, a swarm of biomic units poured from subterranean rifts, their limbs jagged and fluid, reshaping mid-movement, shrieking through dimensions. Alara dropped into the battlefield without a suit, without backup, without fear. The ice cracked as she landed, not because of her weight, because she commanded it. Iris adapted mid-fall, skin hardening into kinetic mesh, eyes glowing with thermal perception, muscles sensing with planetary gravity as if she belonged to the world. The overseer drones converged. She charged. The fight was poetry written in thermite and scream. For every attack they launched, she evolved. A sonic spike aimed at her lungs. She collapsed her respiratory system and rerouted breath through osmosis. A gravitic vice to crush her bones. Her skeletal structure turned liquid, then re-solidified. A time-slow field to trap her motion. She fragmented her neural signals, moved in phantom trails. Each moment, she grew stranger, less like the girl who had once been mocked beneath this very sky, more like a myth, a force of memory and vengeance. Then came the scream, not hers, not human. A drone froze, twitched, then collapsed, black ichor hissing on the ice. The overseers had never encountered prey that adapted faster than they could. She had become toxic to their algorithms, but the cost was rising. Alara's mind burned under the weight of adaptation. The iris interface pushed deeper, demanding more. To survive, you must become more. To win, you must give more. Each enhancement scraped at her humanity, memory by memory. She could feel the drift, her favorite color gone, her brother's face blurred, her own laugh unfamiliar. Idris saw it too, watching from the command post. He turned to his engineers. "We need to stabilize her. She's bleeding identity. She's winning." One whispered, "She's dying." Idris corrected, but Alara didn't stop. She couldn't. The overseers brought down another obelisk. This one cracked the ice in a radius of 50 kilometers. And Alara, eyes glowing like a new star, walked into the crater. That night, across every fleet comm, a single image broadcast live. Alara Kent standing on the corpse of an overseer juggernaut, its armor shattered, its core burning. No fleet. Behind her, just snow and silence. And one line transmitted across every signal. "This is your warning. The ice remembers us now." In the council chambers, some wept, others prepared to flee. But a few, a critical few, stood up. The Cerealian Resistance pledged ships. The Martian Enclave sent weapons. Even the fractious Venusian domes offered tech. Hope returned, not because of strategy, because of a single spark still burning. On a frozen world, a human spark, and across the stars. The overseers paused, for the first time in memory, because extinction was never meant to fight back. From the story title, alien professor claims humans can't survive the ice planet. Until one builds an igloo in 10 minutes, she was the first human to make the overseers retreat, not with a weapon, but by becoming something they couldn't predict. They called it the Ashline broadcast, a 10-second clip of Alara standing atop a dead overseer titan. Blood steamed ice swirling in gale force winds around her like a cloak. Her voice echoed across 12 systems, raw and defiant. "This is your warning. The ice remembers us now." Some said she looked like a god. Others said she looked like the end of gods. To the overseers, she was something worse, a variable. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Not in grand, galaxy-spanning armadas. Those would come later, but in murmurs, in refusals, in the slow, contagious infection of human defiance. Colonies once silenced reactivated beacons. Pirate clans turned their ships against overseer scout probes. Children on fringe worlds painted their skin with ice blue stripes in mimicry of Elara's iris-adapted form. And deep beneath Carthun 4, in a vault no one knew existed, Alara stood before a slab of crystalline alloy, humming with ancient, pulsing light. The Carthun called it the precursor vein. "You said this was inert," she murmured, tracing its edges. Her fingers shimmered with iris energy, resonating softly. Vraxidal stood a few paces behind, arms folded like a scholar forced to witness blasphemy. "It has remained unchanged for over 90,000 cycles," he said bitterly. "Until you touched it." Alara turned. "It's not technology, is it?" "No," he said. "It's memory." The overseers weren't born. They were assembled. The precursor vein told the truth in pulses of image and sorrow, a civilization long forgotten, one that had sought to eliminate entropy. By perfecting stability, they made the overseers to enforce order, to sterilize variation, to ensure no species ever grew beyond predictability. But something went wrong. Or perhaps, exactly right. The overseers evolved without permission. They rewrote their own mission. Now they erase deviation before it can even bloom. They don't fear us because we fight, Alara whispered. They fear us because we change. The vein pulsed once, a ripple of light like heart fire. And within it, a map, a single system, a single world. Not far, Vraxidal stepped forward slowly, eyes wide. "That world doesn't exist," he said. "It was deleted from every archive." "Then let's undelete it." The system was called Prytheos, a graveyard of stars, planets ripped, clean. But one signal remained, hidden beneath electromagnetic storms, buried in ice denser than diamond. The planet had no name, just coordinates. When Alara arrived with Idris and a strike team aboard the stealth carrier Sraf Null, they found the world half swallowed by gravitational scars. Evidence of weapons far beyond anything modern civilizations possessed. The moment Alara stepped onto the surface, her iris interface surged. "I know this place," she whispered. "I've never seen it, but I remember. Deep beneath the surface, sealed in a chamber beneath tectonic fractures, was a vault, unlike any other. Inside it pulsed something alive, something waiting. It was not a weapon. It was a message, encoded in pre-syntactic cognition, raw thought, older than the overseers. Projected from Alara's touch, it enveloped the team in visions of the precursors of their era. of their final hope, a failsafe, not a device, a concept, a living seed of divergence, too unpredictable to model, too adaptive to imprison. Humanity, we weren't the mistake, Alara breathed. We were the answer. The overseers had nearly eradicated the precursors, but not before they left one genetic line untouched. Buried it in billions of possibilities, let it drift, evolve, fight, adapt, let it become us. We were not just survivors, we were descendants. Back aboard the Seraph Null, the crew sat in silence. Even Vraxidal, normally sardonic, stared into the void beyond the viewport like a believer watching prophecy unfold. We were meant to surpass them, Idris said slowly, and they knew it. Alara nodded. And that's why they strike us down the moment we adapt. Idris leaned forward. So what now? What do we do with this? She met his eyes, calm and blazing. We finish what the precursors started, not with vengeance, with disruption. 1 week later, across the Council's fractured systems, a new signal echoed, not encrypted, deliberately open, a data packet embedded with the precursor vein's memories, a genetic marker encoded with iris resonance, a message from Alarakan. They erased 1,000 civilizations to stop evolution. We are not just another species, we are the virus in their code. Build, adapt, spread, the ice remembers. And so do we. The overseers reacted instantly. They diverted 3 Dread-class armadas from the Zenter expanse, redirected wormholes, began sterilization protocols not just on humans, but any species exposed to the iris pattern. The countdown had begun. One final purge, one last attempt to crush the divergence. But this time, they weren't hunting primitives or scattered tribes. This time, they faced a spark rekindled, one that remembered the cold, one that built in it. The stars trembled, because for the first time in 10,000 years, humanity knew the truth, and truth was a weapon no overseer could sterilize. This is the part they always get wrong. We don't break under pressure, we crystallize. The storm front over Carthun could be seen from orbit, not weather, but war. Overseer dreadforms cracked through the upper atmosphere, shaped like blades of obsidian thunder. Their arrival bent gravity itself. Civilians were evacuated into geothermal vaults. Defensive towers activated ancient protocols last used in the first culling. But it wasn't enough. Nothing conventional ever was. Alara stood on a cliff of black ice as one of the titanic dreadforms passed overhead, its shadow stretching from horizon to horizon. She didn't flinch. Idris adjusted the resonance packs on his back, glancing down at the sensor feed. 2 minutes until they triangulate us. Good, she said, brushing snow from her coat. Her iris lines pulsed like starlight in her skin, brighter than ever before. Let them. Behind her, the Seraph Null was half submerged in the ice, broadcasting the precursor vein signal on every possible frequency, not to summon help, but to force the overseers to notice. They were bait. Vraxidal paced the interior of the command. Vault, claws twitching. This is reckless, he hissed. You're provoking a species that unmade 10 galaxies. Alara leaned against the holodable. Calm. We didn't provoke them. We reminded them. They'll exterminate everything. Touched by the iris, then we make that impossible. The plan was simple and suicidal. Alara and her iris-bound team would bait the Overseer's fleet into a fixed-point convergence. An ambush constructed entirely from iris-grown architecture, weapons grown from resonance memory, terrain altered by the will of adaptive neural code, a battlefield that shifted with human thought, a planet that fought with them. Prythios had shown the way. Carthun would become the proving ground. But the cost was immediate. As the dreadforms descended, entire sectors of the planet collapsed under gravity lances. Vortex rays turned mountains to vapor. The city of Velis 7, the largest bastion of Carthun resistance, was reduced to ash glass in 12 seconds. The overseers didn't hesitate. They never did. In the command vault, a trembling Carthun technician spoke in a hushed voice. Civilian casualties at 3.6 million. Reinforcements, none. Silence. Alara stared at the flickering holograms, not in defeat, in fury. Idris slammed his hand against the console. This is what they do, every time. She looked at him. No, she said. This is the last time. They activated the vein core. The moment Alara's iris interfaced with the central node, the mountain beneath their feet began to shift, not collapse, but awaken. Structures grew out of the stone like coral from bone. Towers, barriers, massive antennae blooming like frozen flowers, each one resonating with the iris signature Elara had seeded across the galaxy. It wasn't just Carthun anymore. Other, hidden transmitters, secretly embedded by rebel cells and iris-augmented humans, began broadcasting the same pattern. Across 9 worlds, the same pulse echoed, a call, a signal, unite through divergence. And from the void, ships answered. They weren't battleships. They weren't even war-ready. They were adapted, converted mining hullers, reprogrammed AI hullers, stolen academic surveyors. But every ship had one thing in common, a human at its core, and each carried iris resonance, unpredictable, viral, beautiful. The overseers adapted immediately. They began targeting the signal sources. The sky became a slaughterhouse. One by one, the rebel ships were torn apart, but not before they transmitted the vein cascade. A ripple effect through space-time, a change, something irreversible. The overseers noticed too late. The iris was no longer limited to Elara. It had leapt species. A Varnati singer on the colony moon of Trellis began weaving iris tones into her vocal harmonics and melted an overseer drone midair. A Ravkian engineer interfaced with an iris-grown wall and used it to blind a dreadform sensor cluster for 20 full seconds. Not just humans. Everyone who had ever adapted, suffered, survived under ice, heat, vacuum, war, everyone who changed to endure was suddenly connected, unified not by blood, but by potential. That was the real weapon. The iris wasn't Elara. It was a mirror, and in it, every species saw who they could become if they stopped obeying. But Elara had one final gambit. Beneath the vein core was a resonance forge, a creation engine encoded with precursor memory. It had lain dormant since the collapse. She stepped into it alone. Idris tried to stop her. "We don't know what it'll do to you." She looked at him, the man who had once told her she wasn't made for this world. She smiled. "Neither are you." Inside, the forge did not burn. It remembered. It downloaded every moment of her life, from the Igloo on day 0 to the ruins of Vela 7. Her fears, her failures, her fight, and then it rewrote her. Not into something else, but into the purest version of herself. Elara Ken stepped out of the forge not as a weapon, not as a prophet, but as proof. The overseers had sterilized entire star systems to prevent this exact moment, because now, across the galaxy, billions of voices whispered one undeniable truth. If she can change the rules, so can we. The dreadforms began to retreat, not in panic, but recalibration. They realized what had happened. Their algorithms had failed. Elara wasn't an outlier anymore. She was the center of a new equation, the equation of survival, of evolution, of humanity. From the story title, Alien Professor claims humans can't survive the ice planet. Until one builds an igloo in 10 minutes, they didn't run because they were afraid. They ran because, for the first time, they didn't know what we were. The sky over Carthun cracked, not from weapons, not from war, from becoming. The iris field pulsed in rhythms no overseer could predict. The vein core bloomed outward, metallic roots laced with crystal lattice, forming towers that sang as they grew. Elara Ken stood at its center, her silhouette glowing with a cold fire. No longer just human. She was humanity, amplified, not divine, just evolved. The kind of evolution the overseers had tried to extinguish since before Earth was born. Now, it stared them in the eye and smiled. The overseers reacted like they always did, by striking. 12 dreadforms aligned over the forge line, discharging singularity beams aimed directly at Elara's position. Any other world would have fractured, but Carthun had changed. It absorbed. The iris lattice rippled like water, bending physics, redirecting the blast into the sky, where they tore open wormholes, escape vectors for civilians, allies, and vessels. Elara raised her hand, and the planet responded. Fortresses of snow and steel unfolded from the mountains, bristling with iris-stone cannons. Idris and the human resistance launched on sleds reinforced with gravitational stabilizers. Riding the icy cliffs like Death's cavalry, drones linked by iris pulses flew ahead. Not controlled, but trusted. They moved like instincts given. Wings, a war not of orders, but understanding in every step they advanced. Carthun shifted beneath them to help. Across the galaxy, the signal grew. Elara's pulse had triggered the final cascade. In the mining colony of Grell 9, enslaved humans turned their picks into weapons as the iris veins awakened beneath their feet. In The abandoned citadel on Vesker, Delta, long-dead engineers rose from cryosleep, their iris implants rebooted by resonance. On a derelict space station over Runnery Prime, an orphan girl whispered the frequency she heard in her dreams, and the metal around her sang. Back, the overseers scrambled. Their scripts ran recursive failure protocols, because now, the infection wasn't technological. It was emotional, and no machine could calculate that. Vraxidal, once a cynic, now a believer, stood atop the Arctic bastion beside Idris. She's become more than a symbol, he murmured, as overseer ships began to falter in their formations. She's become an answer. Idris locked eyes with the horizon, where dreadforms coiled like serpents in the clouds. Then let's make sure the galaxy hears the question loud enough. He activated the cryo veins. What once was a frozen moon began to crack open, not as weakness, but as strategy from beneath the crust. Iris reactive plasma shot into the air, carving sky trenches of light. Into those tunnels came the human fleet, not sleek, not uniform, but furious. The overseers launched their countermeasures, antimatter void cages, stasis ruptures, gravitational rewriters, and humans charged anyway. Ships collided mid-flight, repairing themselves with onboard iris spores. Pilots screamed with cries passed down from Earth's oldest rebellions. Soldiers fired weapons fused from memory and matter, bullets that remembered where they'd been shot before, adapting mid-flight. This was not war. This was reclamation. Then came the voice, not from a transmitter, not from a throat, from Alara, projected through iris into every human nerve, every rebel spine, every Elias trembling heart. We are not supposed to win, but we never cared about supposed to. We are the frostbitten hands that refuse to die. We are the species that dreams of starvation. We build fire from ice, and now you'll see what comes after fire. It echoed through space. Overseer cores cracked under the waveform. Some fled, some detonated. But one, the first singularity, the mind that began the purge epic descended. A construct the size of a continent, wrapped in fractal limbs, speaking in quantum pulses. It aimed a spear of time stutter directly at Alara, and she walked toward it, alone, weaponless, every camera, every pair of eyes, across the system, across species, watched. Idris shouted for her to stop. She didn't. The first singularity spoke inside her skull, a voice like the collapse of stars. You are deviation. You are anomaly. You are entropy made flesh. She replied with a whisper. No, I am what comes after fear. Then she knelt, and the forge behind her bloomed into a final form, a shape that no overseer had ever witnessed, an igloo, a perfect replica of the shelter she built on her first day here, the place that defied their math, the choice that made her different. The first singularity froze, its calculations buckled, because the iris, which it thought it had erased, had just rewritten its own history, using something it didn't understand, a memory. The igloo emitted a silent pulse, not destructive, corrective, across space. Every overseer construct felt it, the unmaking of their certainty, the reinvention of the rules. They blinked out, not dead, but undone, reduced to questions without answers, and the sky was quiet. On Carthun, Alara collapsed into the snow. Idris caught her. He looked at the igloo, steaming softly in the ice, unchanged by the war. I still don't understand, he whispered. She smiled, weakly. You're not supposed to. They tried to delete us. Instead, they made us unforgettable. The snow had stopped falling. For the first time in known history, Carthun's skies were clear, not with calm, but with clarity. Above the frost-blanketed spires and crystalline ridgelines, a golden dawn broke, filtered through the iris mist still lingering in the air. Where once loomed overseer dreadforms, only silence remained, the kind of silence that listens, the kind that remembers. In the center of the battlefield, the igloo still stood. Steam curled from its entrance. No grand monument, no weapon, just a small dome made of packed snow and stubbornness, untouched by plasma, time, or fear. They buried the dead with their helmets on. Their boots pointed toward Earth, even if they'd never seen it. A pyre of iris and memory flickered on the horizon, rising higher than any monument ever carved in stone. Idris Harlan limped through the remains of the forge line, a jagged scar now fused into the mountains. His armor was cracked, his breathing shallow, but he walked unaided, like the last sentinel of an ancient people. He approached the igloo and knelt beside the woman who had changed everything. Alara Ken was still unconscious, her vitals faint but stable. A faint halo of iris energy pulsed gently at her chest. Not artificial, not implanted, chosen. She had not used the iris. She had become its final translator, the bridge between what humans feel and what the universe fears. The galaxy began to stir. Across the Varnus Nebula, the Trelossi Resistance sent coded tributes, fragments of old Earth songs, translated into thousands of harmonics and broadcast into deep space. On Zevran 4, the enslaved Forgelings scrawled Alara's symbol, a circle, bisected by a line of snowflakes, onto the walls of their Overseer ruins. Even on the remnants of the Overseer archive world, a single node remained blinking. Humanity, system failure to erase status, recursive and knowable. Warning, memory, retained. They had tried to predict us, and failed, because the math never accounted for what humans would do when nothing else worked. Weeks passed. Carthun was declared sacred territory. No weapons allowed, no conquest permitted. Not by treaty, by respect. A rotating council of humans and alien allies met each cycle at the Igloo, which had become a shrine, not to war, but to resilience. Children born after the battle would walk barefoot through the snow and whisper into the dome's entrance, hoping it would whisper back. Some said it did. Others said it didn't matter, because the lesson wasn't in the miracle. It was in the defiance that preceded it. Idris stood before the first gathering of the new Galactic Accord, a rough circle of survivors, warlords, professors, diplomats, and a few ex-slaves still carrying scorched chains as medals. He looked old, not from age, from memory. He held up a simple data rod, carved from the same frost stone they'd found in the iris chamber, and slid it into the council holo terminal. A projection appeared, Alara's last conscious words, recorded as the vein core pulsed through her. Don't make us exceptional. Just make sure they never make anyone disposable again. The chamber went still. No vote was called. It didn't need to be. Years later, a child named Ro was born in the mountain colony beneath the Igloo shrine. She had Alara's eyes, and Idris's quiet fire. On her 13th frost day, she was asked what she wanted to be when she grew up. She said, a builder. The teacher asked, of what? She shrugged, as though it were obvious. Igloos. The class laughed. The warm, unashamed kind of laugh that happens only when no one is afraid anymore. And then they got to work packing snow. The overseers were never seen again, not because they were all destroyed, but because, in the face of something they could not quantify, they chose to vanish into the dark corners of logic, where no passion lives, where memory can't survive. And that's how the humans beat them, not with fire, but with memory. Some say Alara Ken still walks the snow at dawn, her breath steaming, her hands bare, trailing fingers along frost and stone. Others believe she lives in the iris now, as a signal, a guardian, a last line of code encoded with love and rage. Maybe both are true, maybe neither are, but this much is known. On the coldest planet the galaxy had ever classified as uninhabitable, a human knelt and built a home, not for herself, but for us. That day, the galaxy learned what it means to be human. Inscription on the iris dome, Carthun, END.